Do you see this? The monad has spotted you. That moment, a glance that feels like recognition more than coincidence, is not accidental. Something in you answered before you even knew the question existed. You have been noticed by a quiet kind of intelligence, and that noticing is an activation, not a spotlight, but a soft ignition. It changes the way you move through the world, the kinds of edges you run into, and the way your presence rearranges other people's inner furniture. Today, I want to show you what it means to be called the Infiltrator, why that title is not a condemnation but an honor, and how to live from that identity without mistaking subtlety for weakness. First, a quick note. If this is touching something true inside you, consider subscribing so you can follow the rest of this series. I'll keep this short and practical. What is the monad? Imagine a very small but precise spark of organizing intelligence, not loud or prescriptive, but like the wind that knows the landscape and chooses its path through the trees. Monad names that quiet influence at the center of awareness, the part that recognizes resonance, nudges alignment, and orchestrates timing without drama. It is not a creed to join, nor a club with rules. It's a way of describing a pointing, a noticing, a selective attunement that sometimes finds certain people and tunes them to a role. That role, the infiltrator, sounds dramatic because the word carries friction. But here, infiltration means blending in with purpose. You move inside systems and circles, not to dominate them, but to stabilize their hidden dissonances, to reflect clarity where confusion has settled. You do this quietly. You do it without seeking applause. The infiltrator's task is subtle influence, to hold a steady reference point in places that normally erode it, and to act like a mirror that gently exposes what was only hinted at. There are 3 unmistakable signs that the monad has turned its attention toward you. If 2 or all 3 of these ring true, you're not merely sensitive or misaligned, you're likely activated. The first sign is cognitive separation. You are able to stand outside patterns and watch them play. Where others are swept along by the current, you notice the eddies. You observe habits, narratives, and behaviors with a kind of clinical tenderness. You can describe what people are doing, why they are doing it, and how long it's likely to last, without needing to be swallowed by it. This doesn't make you cold. It simply places you outside automatic consensus. An example, in a team meeting, everyone rushes towards the most popular solution. You find yourself articulating an overlooked question. What are we trying to preserve here? That question slows people down because it points away from momentum and towards alignment. Cognitive separation often felt lonely at first, a person at the edge of a group, noting what others miss, but it's precisely the capacity the infiltrator uses.
The second sign is early spiritual depth. You arrived at certain big questions before your peers did. While friends were discovering conventional aims, you were already uneasy with easy meanings, asking about purpose, integrity, and the quiet laws behind visible outcomes. You might have found books, teachers, or practices that others later described as deep, yet you felt their pull years earlier. This depth shows up as an orientation toward first principles, moral subtleties, layers of causality, and an impatience with surface-level explanations. A short vignette. A young person in a small town reads about ancient maps and metaphors, then spends nights piecing together patterns that make the ordinary world suddenly speak. They are not eccentric by accident. They perceive different coordinates. The third sign is quiet but accurate intuition. It's not theatrical prophecy or random guesswork. It's a small, reliable compass that points before evidence appears. You notice near knowing. You hedge one route and later discover you avoided a problem. You decide not to say something, and a heated exchange dissolves. It's the kind of intuition that keeps you from being trampled by avoidable mistakes and gives you a pace of decision others mistake for indecision. People might call you lucky, but for attuned souls, luck is often precision, timing that aligns with an inner attunement. If you recognize these signs in yourself, the hard questions naturally follow. Why has life often felt unstable? Why do relationships flare briefly and then dim? Why do systems seem to resist you? The truth is this. The very features that make you effective as an infiltrator create friction when they first show up in a world calibrated to integration rather than attunement. Friction, isolation, and instability are not punishments. They are exposure and calibration. Think of exposure like a diagnostic light. When a sensitive instrument enters a noisy environment, its sensitivity makes the noise obvious. Most people acclimate to noise. Attuned people cannot. That sensitivity throws into relief misalignments that others accept as normal. You see the worn gears of institutions, the contradictions in people's moral language, the ways comfort and convenience sabotage deeper truth. That truth-telling role draws reactions. It reveals what was buried, and anything unearthed provokes movement, resistance, or transformation. Isolation appears because the world you move through is not set up to sustain your inner reference point. You are calibrated to a different axis. Calibration is the slow process by which your sensitivity finds shape. Imagine being a finely tuned instrument placed in climate-controlled rooms for years, then moved into stormy weather. You must refit before you can play reliably. Calibrating through friction means learning how to occupy boundaries without being consumed by the friction itself. You learn timing, redirection, and the art of minimal intervention. Rarely does an infiltrator shout instructions. More often, they place a seed, step back, and let the environment respond. Now, let's make a gentle distinction: integrated souls and attuned souls. This is not a hierarchy, it's a difference in function. Integrated souls thrive inside structure. They are the steady currents of workplace systems, cultural rituals, and familial patterns. Integration means you have adapted to the cadence of society. You find meaning in established rhythms, and you often keep institutions running. Integrated souls are the ones who make systems legible and dependable. Attuned souls, the infiltrators among them, conserve an inner reference that is not defined by social rhythms. They are awake to subtle discrepancies and maintain an internal map that sometimes diverges from common sense. Attuned people carry an inner compass that the world's maps do not always reflect. That divergence can be a gift or a liability depending on context. Neither type is better. Both are necessary. Integrated souls stabilize. Attuned souls introduce small pivots that can redirect whole systems. When they work together, the cultural body is both reliable and capable of evolution. Because attuned people operate differently, the monad's protective pattern looks different than what most expect. Protection here is often procedural and strategic rather than overt. It appears as timing, redirection, and near misses that reshape outcomes without promise of immunity. Timing is the simplest protection. Many attuned persons report that doors close and open with uncanny precision. A job offer disappears just before you would have accepted it, only to reveal a clearer path later. A relationship ends in a way that initially feels catastrophic, but months later you see how that severance spared you from a deeper misalignment. This is not magical immunity. It's the way alignment favors possibilities that match your inner reference. Redirection is subtler. You intend one route, and an unexpected detour hands you exactly what you need to develop a particular skill or insight. Think of someone who plans to study law, but is rerouted into restorative mediation work after a project collapse. The detour is less about punishment and more about shaping capacity. Attunement requires certain muscles, and redirection builds them. Near misses are a third mechanism. These are the small avoided catastrophes that feel like luck but behave like precision avoidance. You miss a flight and later learn there was trouble on the plane. You forget to say something and later discover your words would have inflamed a situation. Near misses are not assurances. They are the monad's way of reducing dissonance without removing all risk. They create breathing room to learn and adjust. Your presence affects others. When you enter a room, things shift.
People can feel that steady reference like a mild gravitational pull. Some tighten, some soften. Some try to mimic it, others grow defensive. The infiltrator functions as a mirror of clarity. Mirrors don't change what they reflect, they reveal it. So your steady inner posture causes people to become more conscious of their own dissonance or hidden commitments. Often this activation triggers resistance. A person confronting an unconscious habit may lash out, project, or withdraw. That is not a failure on your part, it's a predictable reaction to exposure. There are 4 common social responses you'll meet: aversion, projection, imitation, and unwitting admiration. Aversion is the defensive recoil. A person feels exposed and pushes away. Projection is when someone attributes uncomfortable traits to you rather than looking inward. Imitation is the quieter, unconscious copying, where your presence articulates behavior others secretly wanted to express. Unwitting admiration is the silent change. Someone begins to reorganize their life around what you modeled without telling you. All of these responses are normal. Your job is not to fix them. Your task is to hold your axis and recognize what your presence steers. Sensitivity in this framework is not a flaw, it is a function. It's a finely tuned sensor that makes you good at pattern recognition, timing, and subtle influence. When treated as a defect, sensitivity gets married beneath armor or numbing behaviors, endless people-pleasing, overcompensation, or seeking external validation. When treated as function, sensitivity becomes a compass. You learn to discern between noise and signal, to pace yourself, and to practice what I'll call minimal intervention. Act where small inputs produce disproportionate alignment, and rest where heavy force would only exacerbate resistance. Practically, cultivating that posture begins with 3 small habits. First, cultivate stillness as a regular practice, not to childishly hope for single miracles, but to keep your internal reference clean. A 10-minute daily practice of quiet, sitting, walking, or simply breathing with attention, reduces reactivity and strengthens the clarity you need for effective infiltration. This is not a ritual to impress others, it's a maintenance task for a sensitive instrument. Second, honor your intuition as data, not destiny. When a subtle knowing arises, treat it like a well-formed hypothesis. Test it through small, low-stakes experiments. Say less, observe more. If your prompt nudges you to wait, try waiting and note what breaks and what holds. This keeps you from turning quiet guidance into coerced outcomes. Third, learn the art of minimal intervention. Ask, what is the smallest action that creates alignment? Sometimes your presence alone reorients a room. Sometimes a single question, what matters most here, breaks a loop. Minimal intervention preserves your energy and reduces backlash. It's not passive, it's strategic.
Remember, being small in spectacle is not insignificance. The world rewards spectacle with attention, but not all influence requires noise. The infiltrator's moves are like careful edits to a text, small punctuation changes that alter the meaning of entire paragraphs. Your influence is exponential precisely because it is subtle. On a larger scale, individual attunement matters to cultural shifts. Social change rarely arrives as a single trumpet blast. It often emerges through a cumulative retuning. Enough people holding new reference points create a vector for different patterns. When attuned individuals maintain steady internal maps and act in small, coherent ways, they shift norms. This happens in families, institutions, and markets. An attuned teacher alters a classroom's moral climate. An attuned manager changes how a department measures success. An attuned artist redirects taste over decades. The ripple effect is quiet but real. The monad's work through infiltrators is not aimed at instant revolution, it aims at durable realignment. It's also important to address the loneliness you may have experienced. Loneliness is not a sign of spiritual failure. It is often a byproduct of maintaining a different axis in a conformist environment. Solitude can become a sanctuary rather than a sentence. Yet radical isolation is not necessary or healthy long-term. Seek relationships that respect your sensitivity, people who can hold paradox, who ask clarifying questions, who allow space without interpreting your reticence as rejection. Community for the attuned is not everywhere. It's selective, reliable, and often small. Quality over quantity matters. You might wonder, how do I use this identity in day-to-day life without creating a mess? Start small. There are practical patterns that honor both attunement and responsibility. When entering any group, do these 3 things: orient, calibrate, and seed. Orient by quickly assessing the group's aim and emotional climate. Calibrate by deciding how much energy to invest. Sometimes you merely observe, sometimes you intervene. Seed by placing one small question or example that shifts the conversation without dominating it. Over time, this practice trains you in minimal intervention and reduces the frequency of painful friction. When choosing work or projects, favor roles that allow you to move inside systems rather than be crushed by them. Consultancy, mediation, mentorship, creative work that reframes narratives, these are often natural habitats. But don't pigeonhole. Attunement can be exercised in any field if you preserve boundaries and pace. Boundaries are essential. Sensitivity without boundaries becomes susceptibility. Boundaries look like temporal limits, clarity about what you will take on, and simple exit plans when a system proves corrosive. These are practical protections that complement the monad's timing and redirection.
There will be moments when you are tempted to perform or escalate your presence to win acceptance. Resist that urge. Authentic influence rarely needs amplification. Instead of pushing to be seen, allow recognition to follow from steady contribution. The infiltrator's power rests in quiet consistency, not in argument or spectacle. Let's return to the idea of near misses for a moment, because recognizing them trains trust in your attunement. Keep a small journal of the times your intuition redirected you, or when timing shifted outcomes. Over months, this log becomes evidence, not proof of a supernatural promise, but proof of a pattern. Your sensitivity delivers information that matters. This helps you calibrate your confidence without inflating it into certainty. At the same time, keep humility as a daily habit. Being attuned does not mean you are always right. It means you are a sensor that sometimes sees better than average. Errors will happen. When you misinterpret, repair quickly and learn. The infiltrator's authority is moral, not coercive. It invites correction and revision. You may also face skeptics who misread your quiet, steady presence as aloofness, superiority, or manipulation. Again, this is not a failure of your identity. It's a natural clash of communicative styles. Communicate clearly about your intentions when it matters. Speak plainly about your aims, and then return to holding your reference. Over time, people learn whether you are trustworthy by watching how you behave, not by listening to what you promise. If you are tempted to count every shift as a sign that you are chosen, slow down. Discernment is part of attunement. Not every synchronicity is a message. Not every odd coincidence requires a life pivot. Use your intuition as a guide, test it, and be willing to wait until patterns form. Ultimately, this path asks you to receive an identity without letting it harden into self-congratulation. Receiving the title of Infiltrator is a call to steady presence, subtle influence, and patient work. It asks you to let your sensitivity be a compass for practical action. The small questions that change meetings, the gentle presence that calms anxious people, the well-placed intervention that prevents collapse. If you take one thing from this, let it be this. Your sensitivity is a tool, not a curse. It equips you to notice misalignments and to plant subtle corrections. You are not meant to be the loudest voice in the room. You are meant to be the reference that others come back to when they need to remember what coherence looks like. Now, a few brief, concrete vignettes to make this real. A teacher named Mara notices that students respond to fear-based incentives with compliance, but not curiosity. She asks one question each class about meaning rather than grades. Over a semester, curiosity grows, cheating drops. She did not overhaul the system. She seeded a different axis.
A startup founder named Elias repeatedly felt the product was promising but hollow. He resisted investor pressure to scale too quickly, chose a smaller round that aligned with product integrity, and redirected the team to deepen one core feature. The redirection felt risky, but a near miss, a failed launch by a competitor who had scaled too fast, validated his restraint. His attunement preserved the product's depth. A friend named Lila has always been able to read company culture at a glance. When she accepted a role in a large firm, she kept a strict time boundary and introduced small rituals for team clarity, a weekly 10-minute alignment check. The rituals were small but contagious. They shifted how decisions were made. These stories aren't fairy tales. They are simple examples of how attunement becomes practical work. As you move forward, remember to practice two kinds of humility: the humility to be corrected and the humility to accept that your small, steady actions can ripple outward. You are part of a larger field of people, integrated and attuned, whose differing functions make coherent life possible. To close, if the monad has spotted you, it is an invitation. Receive it without dramatics. Trust your sensitivity without mistaking it for omniscience. Cultivate stillness, test intuition with small experiments, and practice minimal intervention. Honor the loneliness when it arrives, and seek the selective communities that sustain you. Know that your quiet presence matters. You are an agent of subtle transformation, whose effects are often invisible at first and profound over time. Share your experience in the comments. What signs have you been noticing? And subscribe for more deep dives into living from this attunement. Your presence matters, and this work is not about spectacle. It's about steady alignment.